Today I'm here with Seth Pogue, and we actually met when I was embedded at Standing Rock with veterans and First Peoples, the Sioux tribe, not Soy tribe, that were at Standing Rock, and dozens of other tribes that were there. And Seth is a Marine. Well, he's no longer Marine, but he was a Marine. He served 5 years, was it?
3 years.
3 years. He served 3 years, and we have done a couple of interviews in the past. And today we wanted to talk about pretty much veterans and veterans issues that are not being paid enough attention right now in the United States, or are simply giving lip service. And that's where we'll start. And I'll let you pretty much take it from there, because there's just a lot of things that I've seen personally that people say they're in support of veterans and veterans issues, but that usually tends to only be true when it's a time of war. We're sending individuals, men and women, to deserts to fight for different things. It's supposed to be for our rights and services. Sometimes it's not for that. But when you hear or see politicians talk about their support for their veterans, but you look at their voting record and look at the things they support, they don't really seem to support actual veterans' rights and issues that are important to veterans. How does, I mean, as you're a veteran, you went through that, you served overseas, how does that make you feel, and what are your opinions on that?
Well, the politicians, if you haven't been able to figure out by now, the politicians are all bought. They all do what the corporations and the banks want to make more money. The American military is used as enforcement for these corporations and banks so that they can seize more power. And this is well documented. The definitions of an economic hitman that goes into it. There are people in the military throughout history like Smedley Butler. He was a major general of the Marine Corps, won the Medal of Honor twice. He worked his way up from lieutenant all the way up to major general, which at the time was the highest rank in the Marine Corps. Was deeply loved and respected by the entire nation. He was, after he got out, he became very anti-war. Spoke out many times that he was a pusher for capitalism, pretty much. And that was the real reason, like, he led invasions of countries, whether he knew it at the time or not. But I mean, that brings us into one of the biggest problems facing veterans today, which is the suicide rate. I mean, vets, both actual veterans and active military, they're killing themselves at a very high rate, much higher than most of our war casualty rates. And a lot of people don't really understand why that's happening. And I can only speak for myself and other veterans that I've spoken to. I mean, I personally have several times, like, been very close. I mean, I'm talking about like condition 1, weapon fully loaded, safety off, like barrel in the mouth, like ready to go. And that's happened several times. And every time I hear another veteran committing suicide, and there's, especially if you actually look at those veterans, maybe they're not as vocal as I am, but many of us are not happy with what we thought we were doing and the realization when we come back home. We're told we're fighting for our rights and freedoms. We come back and we hear, thank you for your service, we support you. And yet our rights and freedoms are disappearing from our country. And there is no huge outcry on the civilian side. There's no huge outcry anywhere. There's no force arming up to stop this violation of our rights. I mean, that's what we swore to do, to defend our Constitution from enemies both foreign and domestic. That's what these people are. They're domestic enemies. Um, our our men and women are killing themselves because we come back and we realize very quickly that this is a country full of hypocrites, who say we support the troops, who we love our rights and freedoms, and yet are unwilling to stop our own government from violating those rights and freedoms. Um, you have men and women in the armed services who witness their best friends fucking die one way or another, for those rights and freedoms. And then to hear these people talk about they support the troops who are fighting for rights and freedoms, and then those same people are for laws that are saying you can run over protesters in streets. Protesters, you have a right to protest in this country. That's what we fought and died for. You have a right to freedom of speech. When they made those free speech zones, there should have been riots. When every time these unconstitutional acts and laws are passed, there should be riots. Those people are committing treason against our country. They're violating their oath. And when more and more veterans are realizing this and seeing the lack of action, um, it's disheartening, man. It's truly fucking disheartening. And you're really faced with uh, some hard choices as a veteran. You're faced with, well, everything I did, those people I killed, all of that was for a lie. I wasn't actually doing that shit for rights and freedoms, you know. Well, fuck this. And they blow their fucking head off. Um, you have people on the other side who maybe are just plagued by what they saw in war. Um, and anyone who fucking is actually behind these politicians who are actively pushing for war, one way or the other, you've never been in a war. And if you actually research war, at least half of the casualties in every war are peaceful civilians. People who have nothing to do with the fucking war. But let's put yourself in their shoes. If you're in a country and you know that there is another country that has armed drones that you can't see, you can't hear, and are bombing schools, hospitals, your home, all in the name of collateral damage. And there's a military force that is fighting that country that is killing your family and your friends. Like, what the fuck would you do? That's called patriotism, when you fight for your country.
Yeah, that's
Patriotism.
yeah, that's the theory where pretty much you bomb yourself into making more enemies than you are friends. It's not winning the hearts and minds. You're causing yourself to have more problems overall, which is a cycle that we've definitely seen in the Middle East since very least the late '60s, which the actions we've been seeing there. And you you definitely said some things I definitely wanted to ask you about. Well, for the first two come off the top of my head are, you mentioned the thank you for your service, and that's something I heard from a lot of veterans actually while at Standing Rock is that phrase doesn't always come off the way many civilians think it does, and I've been told specific reasons for that, and I would definitely like to hear your comments about that, and also you mentioned about protest and and I would like your thoughts on how that led you to go to Standing Rock to again fight for rights and freedoms even after you were no longer active duty.
Okay. Well, at Standing Rock, like some other veterans have covered in their interviews, we went out there to Standing Rock, number one, to protect American rights and freedoms, which were being violated continuously. We went out there because that's what we swore to do. And there is no expiration date on your oath. Whether you're out of the service or not, that's just the service. If the American people do not step up and try to defend these rights and freedoms, then they will be lost, and the military will not have any love towards civilians after that. Like, being in the service, I remember constantly hearing how stupid and disgusting civilians were and their life, and that they're not worth shit, and you can't ever fucking rely on them. And you get out of the service and you're like, well, like the whole time you're hearing that, you're like, yeah, whatever, you know, it's all just like blah, 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 you know, trying to hype up the service type bullshit. But when you get out and you're realizing like, oh, a lot of civvies, like, they get their feelings hurt if they fuck up and you tell them like, dude, I've already told you, don't do this. You did it again. So, but now your feelings are hurt and now I get in trouble because I yelled at you when my entire time in the service, like, that's all you did. Like, if someone fucked up, you got in their face. You told them, hey, you fucked up. Don't do it again. And if they gave you any lip, they can run. There are plenty of freaking hills around here. Run your ass off. But all of a sudden, you get out of the service and you can't do that. So all of a sudden, you're trying to be mindful of like people's emotions, and you're all touchy there. But you're constantly hearing, thank you for your service. Now, when I was in the service, I still didn't like hearing it because like I've never been in combat. Like, I signed up to do combat. I went into the Marine Infantry to do combat, deployed, never saw combat. And that wasn't anything on our unit's part, but we had a bunch of problems in our command. So it's so, oh man, it's literally it's such an intense emotion. I can't even describe it. When I hear thank you for your service or anything like that, and I see like the person is, you know, 100% behind Hillary or Trump or either of the two parties, it really doesn't matter what your contender is. If you're still for the parties, like, it's, I have no idea like at what point you're going to wake up and realize like, oh, those parties are owned by the people who don't give a shit about us and only care about money. And nothing will ever change that. Even if we got a third party in, once it became official, they would start being bought. So, like, we have to actually take control of our government. And the Declaration of Independence, which again was the very first document of this nation, says the purpose of government: to guard life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness of its citizens. We know they're not guarding the liberty, they're violating it continuously with legislation and action. We know they're not guarding our lives, they're sending us to war, they're constantly trying to have you thrown into prison so you can be a legal slave. Then they're pursuing stupid practices and destroying nature and potentially our entire freshwater supply of the nation. So they're not doing those two responsibilities. Well, I mean, surely they're guarding our pursuit of happiness. Well, no, they're not doing that either. There are plenty of legislation that's going against. I want to live in an RV with my wife, and we want to travel the country, doing whatever we want, going to protests, etc. There are legislation laws going into effect that are saying it's illegal to have like that be your permanent residence. So at what point then do you support the troops? Are you really thanking me for my service? Because when you're in the service, you are able to see it, like right off the bat, which I wasn't. I grew up in Texas, you know, 9/11 happened, and we were like, war, fuck yeah, I can't wait for this. And more time went on, and we were like, okay, all three reasons for the war against Iraq have been proven to be bullshit. So why are we here? And I remember being on patrol. Conclusion was, well, we are here, and the people in America aren't, in a huge outcry to pull left. So that's kind of weird how I was seeing my friend freedoms that we're losing, but we're not losing the war. For your service and other things like that. And it really, dude, it like when you have friends or family like who die in that, and then they thought they were fighting and dying for this idea, which is a very
It looks like we might have a little communication issue with yeah, it looks like things are frozen up a bit. What we're going to do is we're going to get Seth back there.
living and watching your country's inaction, our lack of care when being violated, and then to like even argue with people and like show them where you're coming from, and they're still like
Yeah, it looks like we are having more communication issues. What we're gonna do is just create a part two because I'm not exactly sure what's the issue, but yeah, we're gonna continue talking to Seth, and it'll just be you won't see any issue on the video, but I'll try to correct that. Hold on.